It was a big day for the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, and it was a big day for numbers, Francis. And let's take a look at some of those numbers. 4.3%. That is the projected budget deficit.
So this is the budget deficit that has widened from a target of just 3.1%. And that number, 4.3, even worse than expected. One of the reasons why we're seeing the rand being weighed. The deficit is the difference between government spending allocations and the money coming in. It means there's a shortfall and South Africa will have to raise the extra money through debt. Gross national debt, a problem, expected to reach 61% of GDP by 2022. And paying the interest and charges on that debt will cost South Africa dearly.
Debt servicing costs are expected to eat up around 15% of budgetary allocations by 2021. 50.8 billion rand, and that's the tax revenue shortfall. And this is the shortfall in tax revenue based on earlier projections. And this means that there's less tax coming in than expected, and government has nearly 51 billion rand less to allocate to worthy spending.
That's the largest downward revision now since 2009. That was when we were in a financial crisis, and it will raise questions about the efficacy of the South African Revenue Service and the reasons behind that tax hole. Gigaba admitted that more South Africans seem reluctant to pay tax, and some are concerned about corruption. He said while most taxpayers remain responsible, there was a slippage in compliance. The next number you see there, 0.7% projected economic growth. It's been revised downward for this year from an earlier projection of 1.3%.
Now, if the economy doesn't grow, South Africa won't be able to deal with unemployment. The current situation is in stark contrast with the targets of the National Development Plan, which included growth of around 5.4% and bringing down unemployment to 6% by 2030. So that looks really, really ambitious now. 13.7 billion rand, that's the next number, and allocations to SAA and the South African Post Office is the additional amount of money that government has allocated to help South African Airways and the Post Office. The money will be used to recapitalise the national airline, meaning that it's not a loan and will not have to be paid back. And some of the money has already been given to SAA due to its dire situation, but a shortfall of 3.9 billion rand remains, Francis.
Yeah, Gigaba today confirming that the bailout will be funded by the sale of government shares in Telkom, which is performing well. So a controversial decision. He says it wasn't made lightly. In response to calls to dump SAA, Gigaba has justified government's view that it is a strategic asset. He says it's in the national interest to have influence over our connectivity to all parts of the world and not rely on the profit and scheduling considerations of global airlines. The final number that we had for you on that graph was 1.3%, which is the fall in the rand. It weakened by that large amount between the start of the midterm budget speech and the end. And we've seen a further weakening. Investors are probably concerned about the wider than expected budget deficit.
South Africa is wading deeper into debt at a time when the economy is not growing, and this situation is one of the reasons that South Africa has been downgraded to so-called junk status by two rating agencies. Now, the shortfall in tax revenue was also much worse than expected.
All right, so since then it's got even bleaker. The rand weakened by more than 2% against the dollar by the close, 3% against the pound. It's broken through the 14 rand to the dollar mark. That brings it to its weakest level this entire year.
Yeah, it started to fall during the midterm budget speech by the finance minister. Investors had many harsh realities to be concerned about, such as falling growth, rising debt, and a shortfall in that projected tax revenue that we talked about. Well, the JSE did manage to end the day a little higher, however, even though global markets have been coming down after a pretty strong run over the last 10 days or so. Naspers carried the market here, and there were also gains amongst the miners and other stocks that benefit from a weaker rand.